Welcome to the opening celebration of the Davis Museum's Fall 2019 exhibitions. I am Lisa Fishman. I am the Ruth Gordon Shapiro Class of 1937 Director of the Davis, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all here this evening. Let me open with an important acknowledgement. The Davis Museum at Wellesley College is located on the ancestral and unceded tribal lands of the Massachusetts people. We acknowledge that the continuing presence of the Massachusetts and their relatives and neighbors, the Wampanoag and Nipmuc peoples, and pay respect to Indigenous elders past and present. Guided by our commitments to diversity and inclusion, to excellence and innovation, and to access for all, the Davis Museum is at the core of Wellesley's mission to educate young women for the world. Always open to the public, we welcome students, faculty, and staff on campus, members of our local communities, and visitors from around the world to our exhibitions, permanent collections, and programs. Tonight, we debut several new exhibitions, all of which will be on view through December 15th. As well, we present an exciting schedule of public programs over the coming months, and I would invite you to consult the fall events fact sheet, which you can find at the front desk in the Davis lobby. And of course, you can always check our website, which is thedavis.org. Now, it is my pleasure and privilege to thank the many generous colleagues and sponsors who have made tonight's exhibitions possible. For Kanishka Raja, I, which I co-curated with the artist Leila Ali, the Francis Christopher Oakley 3rd Century Professor of Art at Williams College, I would like to thank the generosity of Wellesley College Friends of Art, the Alice Gertrude Spink Art Fund, 1963, the June Feinberg Stamen Class of 1948 Art Fund, the Davis Museum Endowed Fund for International Cultural Programs, the Helen McLean Endowed Program Fund for Contemporary and South Asian Art, the Mildred Kluper Glimscher Class of 1961 Endowed Fund. The forthcoming catalog is supported with additional funds generously provided by Pratik and Priyanka Raja, Jane B. de Beauvois, Jane Penner, and Julie Raja. Many thanks to these individual sponsors, and particularly to Leila Ali and Julie Raja for their work on behalf of this project. Congratulations to Carrie Cushman, the Linda Wyatt Gruber Class of 66 Curatorial Fellow in Photography, on the exhibition Recent Acquisitions, New Photographs by Haley Morris Kafiro and Habiba Naroz, which is supported by funds given through the generosity of Linda Wyatt Gruber, Class of 1966. And also on the Moon Landing series, a first presentation of selections from the Peter J. Cohen collection of amateur photos, a teaser of sorts, for a major presentation that Carrie is working on from a gift of almost 1,000 snapshots coming up in the spring of 2020. Congratulations to Alicia LaTorres, Friends of Art Curatorial Research Assistant, and her co-curator, Catherine Davies, Class of 2019, the Summer 2019 Eleanor P. DeLorme Museum Intern, on Hidden Histories, Revealing the Life of a Painting. The exhibition is generously supported by Peter H. and Joan Macy Caskell, Class of 1953, whose gift of a 16th century Venetian painting of the Holy Family with St. Catherine, St. Sebastian, and a donor has proved to be a fascinating object of study. Many thanks to Rona Macbeth and Lydia Votz, our colleagues at the MFA Boston's Painting Conservation Department, who undertook the technical analysis on the work, and to Peter and Joan Caskell, whose generosity has made this project possible. Congratulations to Alexandria Smith on Seed to Harvest, the 3rd Windows Invitational Commission. Alex, who is now head of painting at the Royal College of Art in London and formerly assistant professor of painting at Wellesley, has transformed our lobby-level windows with adorned portraits of the 5 first African-American graduates from the college. And it is my pleasure and honor to thank the Davis staff, all of whom are such generous colleagues and who work tirelessly to steward our signature Raphael Moneo building and the exceptional collections it houses, to realize a new slate of innovative and challenging exhibitions every semester, to welcome our visitors, and to make evenings like this one possible with such warmth for our community. My thanks particularly to Bark Beeman, who is Manager of Exhibitions and Collections Preparation, to Helen Connor, who is Assistant Registrar for Exhibitions and Digital Resources, to Serena Conreddy, our Media Specialist, to Alicia LaTorres, our Friends of Art Curatorial Research Assistant, and to Alyssa Wolf, who's the Assistant to the Executive Director, otherwise known as my assistant. Let me turn now to this evening's program and introduce Amanda Gilvin, the inaugural Sonja Novak Koerner, Class of 1951, Senior Curator of Collections and Assistant Director of Curatorial Affairs, and Curator on the exhibition Fatima Tuger, Home's Horizons. As I do so, I would first like to thank the artist, Fatima, for sharing your brilliant work with us and offer my congratulations on the realization of your glorious new installation, Deep Blue Wells, a Davis commission that makes its debut this evening. And I would like to thank Brick Simple, who have gone above and beyond to support the many new and innovative technological aspects of the exhibition. I would like to acknowledge and thank Amanda Gilvin, who has done an exceptionally fine job over the several years of this project's genesis. Intensive work that required grant writing and international research, work on campus and beyond, including the coordination of a seminar that brought together Wellesley faculty and staff with Fatima visiting on campus and the other visiting scholars who authored the gorgeous catalog, which we are delighted to present to you today and which is available in the Davis lobby. Amanda's advocacy, her commitment to Fatima's work, and to the realization of this major exhibition and publication have been uncompromising throughout. Please join me in welcoming Amanda Gilvin.
I first want to echo Lisa's thanks to my colleagues at the Davis, including Lisa herself, who has supported this exhibition since I pitched it just a month after joining the Davis staff. So I really appreciate her receptiveness to an idea from a new staff member. Welcome. We're really thrilled that you're here tonight. And I know many of you have already been involved with the show or attended some of the programming that we've already had on campus in the last year. So I would next like to thank the participants of the faculty and staff seminar from across campus who represent the many different disciplinary approaches that are vital for understanding Fatima's complex artistic practice. So thank you to Ama Bafra Ababarese, David T. Olson, Elizabeth Siwo, Eric Hatalamathis, Jordan Tynes, Kelly Jackson, Nikki Green, Ori Shire, Tracy Cameron, and Serena Conreddy. I also am thrilled to acknowledge the students and postbac fellows and a graduate fellow who have been involved in the development of this exhibition, who include Alana Bridges, Maddie Allen Rahill, Yanni Lee, Siobhan Finley, and Laura Baudet. I'm very thrilled that a couple of our catalog authors are here with us tonight to be acknowledged, including Delinda Collier, who's an associate professor of art history, theory, and criticism at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and Jennifer Bajorek, who's associate professor of comparative literature at Hampshire College and visiting associate professor of French studies at Smith College. And another author who was also a speaker at the seminar is Nicole Fleetwood, who's associate professor of American Studies and Art History at Rutgers University. I want to, again, Lisa and I are really hawking this book tonight. It's amazing. And because of Fatima's artwork. And we have a longstanding relationship with Stoltz Design, who does incredible inventive work themselves. So we're especially excited to thank Cliff Stoltz, Mary Roth, and Catherine Hughes for their rigorous and detailed and imaginative work on our publications. I also want to thank Hermer Verlag, the publisher of this catalog, in conjunction with the Davis, especially Elizabeth Rochelle Shalem, a senior editor. Next, thanks to our event speakers, I'll be introducing Professor Ikem Okoye shortly, but also Jesse Berdinka, Jordan Tynes, Ken Botnick, Stephen Hamilton, Ellen Noble, and Suzanne Langridge. We're so thrilled that the development of this exhibition and its programming encompasses the entire campus. So you'll note, if you're attending some of our programs over the next couple of days, some happen in the museum and give you many more opportunities to engage with Fatima's artwork, but also we ask you to go to the Knapp Center in the basement of the library, to Paramuseum Pond, to the art building, and I'm forgetting what, the Newhouse Center, our Humanities Center, for those of you from off campus, to really emphasize the multiple perspectives that we're excited to bring to Fatima's work. So I want to acknowledge our on-campus collaborators and co-sponsors of these events, but also events that we've had over the last year. These include Africana Studies, but the Botanic Gardens, Cinema and Media Studies, Computer Science, Economics, the Harambee House, Media Arts and Sciences, Paulson Ecology of Place Initiative, Philosophy, Regeneration Farm, and the Susie Newhouse Center for Humanities. Everybody is really passionate about Fatima's work, and we're thrilled to bring everyone together. So tomorrow we'll start off with a workshop on augmented reality, and I'll give a tour of the exhibition at 1:30, and then you can join us at the Newhouse Center for a panel of artists thinking through contemporary practices with indigo. Generous support for the exhibition and publication was provided by the Wellesley College Friends of Art at the Davis, who are such a vital support to our institution. The Catherine Wasserman Davis 28 Fund for World Cultures and Leadership, Mildred Cooper Glimcher 61 Endowed Fund, the E. Franklin Robbins Art Museum Fund, the Davis Museum and Cultural Center Endowed Fund, the Anonymous of Class of 1970 Endowed Davis Museum Program Fund, the Judith Blau Wentz 57 Museum Programs Fund, and the Constant Ride Roby 81 Fund for Museum Exhibitions. We'd like to thank Tamara Harris for her foundation's generous gift in support of programming and education. And I have a huge thanks for Brick Simple LLC, especially Jesse Berdinka, who we're so excited is here with us tonight, and his team of committed project managers and software developers who worked with Fatima on the amazing app that you can use to engage with the catalog and to see parts of the new commission, Deep Blue Wells. And these include Adam Pellid, Mara Hunter, Colin Zellen, Alexandra Garibaldi, and Kara Henricks. I'd like to thank the Andy Warhol Foundation for the Visual Arts, which awarded the project both a curatorial fellowship and an exhibition grant. And these funds were vital for us to be able to present this gorgeous catalog as well as the commission. And finally, I too would like to thank Fatima Tuger for the inventive originality of her artistic practice, her refusal to abide by any rules of contemporary art, for her creation of her alternative imaginary, which I expect we're going to hear more about in a moment. Thank you for transforming our perspectives on history, technology, and the home in your brilliant new work, Deep Blue Wells. I'm now really pleased. We should clap for all of these wonderful supporters. There are probably about half of you in the room, so thanks so much for for the work that you've already put in and for being with us tonight and for your participation in the programs still to come. So now I'm so pleased to introduce the speakers joining us for the evening, and who include Professor Ikem Stanley Okoye, an associate professor in the Department of Art History at the University of Delaware, where he holds a joint appointment in the Africana Studies Department. Nigerian-born and raised in Essex, England, and educated at the University College of London and at MIT. His work currently focuses on the intersections of art, architecture, and landscapes in Africa, leapfrogging from the present into the pre-colonial period era of the transatlantic slave trade, all of which he sometimes describes as art's complexity in the vicinity of architecture. He's received grants and fellowships over his career that have included the Canadian Centre for Architecture, the Rockefeller Foundation, and the Institute for Advanced Study at Princeton. His work on the conjunctures of both African, American, and European histories of art, architecture, photography, and film have been published in many journals, including the Art Bulletin, the Harvard Architectural Review, Interventions, a journal of postcolonial studies, Res, the Journal of Anthropology and Aesthetics, and Critical Interventions, as well as in edited books and online platforms that have included African Mobilities. This is not a refugee camp exhibition. Cultural Landscape Heritage in Sub-Saharan Africa, Art History and Fetishism Abroad, Strangers, Diasporas, Exiles, and the Anthropologies of Art. Professor Okoye has also served on the editorial board of Art Bulletin. He has been the national chair of the Association of African Studies Programs, and he has 3 books in process, the one most likely to be first published being Hideous Architecture through Brill Academic Publishers and Leiden. So we really look forward to seeing all of those books. And of course, our featured artist and speaker of the evening is Fatima Tuger, who was born in Nigeria and raised there and in the United Kingdom. She has studied, lived, and worked in the United States since the late 1980s. Her work uses technology as both medium and subject to serve as metaphors for power dynamics. She combines objects, images, and sounds from diverse cultures, geographies, and histories to comment on how media and technology diversely impact local and global realities. Her work seeks to enable the agency of the viewer and participant as implicated in the dynamics of making, subject, object, and experience, to which end she fosters interactivity, even when using so-called traditional and non-technological materials. Her position is that all human making is technological and collaborative. Her work has been exhibited in over 25 countries on 5 continents at venues such as the Museum of Modern Art, the Centre Georges Pompidou, and the Second Johannesburg Biennale. She has been the recipient of many awards and commissions, including fellowships from, and this is this year, the John Simon Guggenheim Foundation, the John Hope Franklin Humanities Institute at Duke University, and the Civitella Ranieri Foundation. So I'm going to invite Fatima to present at the podium, after which Ikem and I will join her at the table in conversation. So welcome to you both.
Well, thank you. While you're putting that, I want to thank the Davis Museum, Amanda Gilvin, the entire staff for all of your hard work with the exhibition. I feel the love, by the way. I want to acknowledge Sherry Sparks. Where are you? Sherry's come the farthest, all the way from Kansas City, just arrived and came straight from the airport. So thank you for making the journey. Jay Hart and Luke. Where are you? Over there. Yes. One of my oldest, dearest friends since undergraduate school is here, who helped me with all of the sewing that was involved with the fabrics. Michael Lightsmith, who rescued me, came all the way from New York, dropped everything. You have my gratitude and my love. Okay. And Brick Simple, who else am I forgetting? whoever I forget, thank you. Like, there was a whole a seminar that we've come back and forth from. So I just wanted to sort of do a quick overview of deep blue wells, sort of to talk about the fact that it's based on a real place where it's been around since 1489, the tie-dye wells in Kano, which is what the inspiration is for creating the artwork itself. And so if you haven't been to the exhibition yet, when you get in, you're going to see these simulated wells with lenticular imagery. And it has to do with sort of trying to simulate different states of the dye in the well, or different environmental circumstances and condition, and the impact, how those impact the wells, or even how people inherit wells, a generation that's younger, which is why in the 70s there was about 2,000 wells. Today we have less than 200, and the reason why nobody's doing that is because it's kind of old-fashioned. So people inherit wells and they end up as trash, where plastic bags go to die, basically, or plastic bottles, because you don't want to let anybody use it as your inheritance, but then you don't do anything with it. So that's why this particular well is trash-based. And then I thought it would be good to just quickly give people a sense of the different titles of the different fabrics, and how I'm thinking and using them. So this is called Muenster and Clouds. The moon is the middle spiraling section, and the stars are, of course, those around, and then on either sides are the clouds. And of course, my aspect of it is bringing the icons that you see on there, the round circles with the augmented reality component that shares different aspects, from documentary information about the wells and the processes in the wells, to my own fantasies about the wells, to other kinds of visualizations. And this one is called At the Center of Gifts and Blessings, and I have the translation in Hausa for those of you who are fluent Hausa speakers. This is sunshine, and basically the idea is that the big bursts are when you look into the sun, you look away, you still see multiple of the sun, and then you see also sunspots. So that's sunshine. And then this one, which is the sort of more traditional, older design that's made, is the Hausa Okoye, which is the 7 Hausa states. And so I have an animation that covers the story of the 7 states, which usually, historically, that story is told as the story of Bayajidda or Abu Yazidu, which is his earlier name. And the reason why it's told in that way, I guess, is because he's a man. But really, the story is the story of Dorama, who is, the female protagonist who started the nation. So I think it's time, for us to sort of flip the storybook and focus on that. So there's the animation goes from, if you care to do it that way, but I think you can understand it because it's shorts. It starts on the top right, I guess is what it's called. And then it goes in a circle and then to the center, and in case anybody cares to follow it that way. Anyway, those are some of the few things I wanted to talk about. This is an overview of the exhibition and to sort of explain the different kinds of encounters that you may encounter. I thank you.
Since you just mentioned Daurama, something occurred to me earlier today about this piece is that in some ways it's a portrait of a woman, right? And I found that very interesting, thinking of certainly your photo montages from the 90s, but also Faith and Gramophone, is in some ways a portrait of a woman. I would just be interested in hearing more about what we might look for to understand about Daurama from this artwork.
Well, I don't know if I should just tell the story or what would be how to go about it. You guys want me to tell the story?
Probably.
I could do it in animation instead of talking.
Oh, yeah, that would be better.
A young female ruler who came to be the founding matriarch of the House of Kingdom. According to the oral traditions of the Daura Emri as written by Prince Alassane Abdulrahman and corroborated by the Durgam Royal Chronicles of Borno. 2,000 years before the Common Era, Daurama, a young Canaanite queen from Palestine who had just inherited the throne after her mother's death, decided to migrate with her people. First, the exodus was to Egypt. Then, some left for Ethiopia, while Daurama and the rest went through Libya, Sudan, Mali, and finally settling in present-day northwestern Nigeria, in a place where legend has it that a group of her ancestors had previously settled and built a well. Daurama named the city after herself, Daura. We continue? Okay. Around the same time as Daurama's migration, Abu Yazidu, Prince of Baghdad, fled from a fierce warrior queen, Zidam, who conquered his father, Abdullahi's kingdom, and scattered their people into 40 groups, each heading their own way. Abu Yazidu and 300 of his people traveled through the trans-Saharan route, entering Kanem-Borno Empire in present-day northeastern Nigeria from the direction of Lake Chad. Not long after settling in Gazargamu, present-day Borno, it was very apparent that Abu Yazidu and his 300 people outnumbered the locals. Soon rumors spread about how the migrants were planning to take over the city and even the kingdom. Once this story reached the Shehu's palace, the court elders debated the matter and came up with a solution that would best benefit the kingdom. Abu Yazidu was to wed Magaram, the Shehu's daughter, and Abu Yazidu's people would now swear allegiance to the Shehu. After all, their strength in numbers, diverse skills, and abilities. After settling in Daura, Daurama continued the Canaan tradition of matriarchs running the court, while the men were relegated to hunting, farming, guarding, and soldiering. They would have lived happily except a python took over their only source of water, the well. He would allow people to fetch water once a week on Fridays after he was sang to and fed. Thereafter, every time new territories were conquered, the Shehu would send the migrants to resettle in the new lands until Abu Yazidu was left with only his bride and one slave. Feeling threatened and vulnerable without his supporters, Abu Yazidu, his wife, and slave set out in the middle of the night. First arriving in Biram, present-day Haeja. But then, one night Abu Yazidu realized that he could still be caught by the Shehu's soldiers. He snuck out alone and headed west without stopping until he reached Gaya, home of the Abagiawa people, who were renowned blacksmiths. There he had a new sword forged, and then he headed northwards until he found Daura. One fine Thursday evening, a man on a horse arrived in Daura, entering the town from the eastern gates. He cut down a tree, then leaned the tree trunk on the wall and climbed over. Once he was behind the walls, he opened the gates and pulled his horse in. He went to the home of an older lady called Ayana and asked for water. Ayana replied, "I have no water until Friday." Handing him a pail, she directed him to the well with instructions of how to get water. After getting to the well, he lowered the pail. Kasugu, the python, pressed down on the pail. The man, remembering the words Ayana had told him, "Kinseki, you release." Once he said that, the python let go of the bucket. He pulled up the bucket, drank some water, and gave his horse some. After that, he lowered the bucket again. Once the python grabbed the pail, he pulled up the bucket with the python, then partially cut off his head, and then finished him off during a second attempt. Then put the head in his bag and fetched another pail of water, which he took to Ayana. By Friday at dawn, the first people at the well realized that the python was gone. There was panic. People feared that the python was out of the well and would wreak havoc. Soon the news that the people were not making their weekly water runs got to the palace. Dorama ordered the announcement drums, then Jinjin, to signal the people to fetch water. Everyone rushed to the well, but no one was brave enough to step up to the rim until a brave called Audu Indi got curious enough to look and then turned to Dorama and said, "The python is dead." "The python is dead?" exclaimed Dorama. "You are a hyena, Audu." She praised him. "May you live long, my queen. I did not kill the python," said Audu. Then Dorama said, "Come forth if you are the one that rid our home of the python, for I shall give you half my land and we shall rule together." Many a man ran off searching for snakes and bringing back their little heads, but none matched the large python's body. Soon the news of Dorama's offer got to Ayana. Ayana brought Abu Yazidu to the well with the python's head, and it matched the body perfectly. Dorama kept her promise of giving half her land, but Abu Yazidu wanted more. He proposed to Dorama. At first she turned him down. In Canaan tradition, queens never married as they were considered too busy with affairs of the state. Over time, Abu Yazidu persuaded Dorama to marry him. She grew fond of him once she learned his story and identified with the similarities of their life's journeys. Once Dorama and Abu Yazidu got married, Dorama explained to him that he would be her husband in name only, and that her slave maid, Bagwaria, will represent her in his bed and palace quarters. Over time, Abu Yazidu learned Hausa, and he was given the name Baya Jida, literally meaning he did not hear before, implying he was not previously a Hausa speaker. Soon Bagwaria, the slave maid, and Baya Jida had a son. His mother named the newborn Karabdagari, or town snatcher. After this, Dorama got nervous that Bagwaria's son would inherit her throne, so she decided to break with tradition and have an heir with Baya Jidda, whom she named Bawo, meaning the rightful owner. After many happy years of ruling together and long lives, Bawo inherited the throne and lived in peace with his half-brother Karabdagari. Bawo went on to have...
Sorry, I'm having some issues here. I see, it's the ones that the cleaner ones that are larger that are showing now. Okay. What number is this? I can't tell. 7? Okay, we're, I think halfway through 7, right?
After this, Dorama Jidda, whom she named Bawo, meaning the rightful owner. After many happy years of ruling together and long lives, Bawo inherited the throne and lived in peace with his half-brother Karabdagari. Bawo went on to have 6 sons, Daura, Gobir, Kano, Katsina, Rano, and Zazzau. His half-brother Karabdagari also had a son called Biram. These 7 sons went on to become known as the founding rulers of the 7 Hausa states that make up the Hausa Kingdom today, with each bearing the name of its founding ruler.
Okay, I think that's it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Amanda's question was, It's kind of a portrait of a woman, just like Faith Gramophone and some of the earlier images. In a lot of ways it is a portrait of a woman. But it's just that it's fascinating to me that story is always told as the story of Baya Jidda. So I thought it was interesting that really it's the story of this woman who came and founded this land. It's her migration that led to the place, but it's never told in that way. So that was why I was interested in retelling the story and focusing on her, as opposed to she's just sort of incidental to the way the narrative is told.
So I think I can jump in here
Please.
a little bit with a related question. I suppose I have two questions sort of tied into one, actually. One is sort of more broad, which is that this particular project seems to contain more pedagogical intention than I think one is familiar with in your work, right? In the sense that there's a very deliberate, even this story, it's sort of very deliberate narration of a history. Mm-hmm. A history that you might have possibly known from childhood or
Yes.
possibly not. But it seems to me that you would have had to have done a lot of work and a lot of research yourself in order to actually produce the complexity of the work that's on exhibition. I have to confess that I've actually been privileged to spend about half an hour looking at the work. So there's something new about this particular project in relation to pedagogy. And I'm wondering in which ways you see yourself as an artist who needs to communicate particular histories to your audience, both your audience here in the United States, but I imagine your audience back in West Africa itself. And then my sort of linked question is, once you start delving into history, obviously history itself is very, very complex. This is a particular narrative of this Seven Hausa state, but it has a lot of figures and motifs that are familiar in other histories, so it takes on a little bit of a quality of something slightly mythic, perhaps. So how do you see yourself located in a history and a critique of it, but also the work as a work that is pedagogical?
I guess the first thing I'll say is that I don't think that is true, that this is sort of my first pedagogical historical approach. I mean, even during my time at the Franklin Humanities Institute as a research fellow there, I did an entire project research based on local water in the city of Durham, or there are other projects that have involved a kind of research approach to, So I think is a facet of my work, but I think overall also the body of work is actually is not just, it's never been all just fun and games for me.
Yeah.
I think I do think through conceptually what it is I'm doing and what I'm trying to do, or even the project that I just finished before coming here at the end of last month, which has to do with a kind of critique of higher education and creating small holograms of different people popping out of school desks. So there's both the content research-based approach, and then there's also the technological research-based approach, and they've always gone kind of hand in hand. Maybe, I don't know if what you're trying to say is that it's sort of, for you, more evident here, or more.
Yes, I think I would say.
crystallized.
I think I would say so. There's a little bit more focus. For example, even the animation, there's a little bit more focus on the narrativity of the stories than I think I'm familiar with, and even some of the earlier work that you mentioned. So I guess I'm just wondering whether whether you sort of see one of the roles of an artist, actually, I mean, I think I know that this is partially your project, but one of the roles of the artist being a kind of education of its audience, even in relation to something rather basic like the history of the Seven Hausa states, which I think for most of the audience, which is why people wanted to hear the story, would be a kind of story that they would not normally encounter or even expect to learn of, even in the context of looking at work by contemporary African artists. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I guess I don't know that I see myself as honestly, I'm not really trying to educate anybody. I think honestly what I am interested in is the kind of art that I'm interested in making is one where you don't actually have to read a book about theory, where you don't have to know any art history, that you can, the narrative has been with me all along, where you can get, anybody can come before it, and it's there. So there is a quality of not being afraid or apologetic about being direct, in which has always been a part of what I'm doing. So I think like the fact that the narrative is out in the forefront is a continuation of that interest to engage people. Without it being like, well, actually, you have to reference a whole bunch of other artists in history, and you have to reference whatever theoretical discourse to be able to access the work. Like, I'm not sure that's the kind of work I want to make. I'm interested. I think I'm pretty clear about what it is I want to say in any given piece, and I go after it.
Okay. I mean, suppose I asked you about deep wells very, very specifically, right? So they're the tie-dye fabrics that are around that room, and then they're the objects within the space itself. So maybe you could sort of tell us a little bit more what led you to that particular phenomenon of the pits and dyeing, which it seems that in order to understand fully, you're also telling us a lot more through these stories, for instance, about the Hausa people, about their history, because one can sort of imagine that it could exist, the objects, and even your sort of translation of the idea of the dye pits, without this history necessarily.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you can understand it without the history, but what I'm trying to do has to do with, I think, so when I'm making work, right, there are different levels of things coming together. So maybe what it is about this specific piece is it underscores context more so than other works, and in other contexts, in other instances, other things come more to the foreground. But in this instance, I thought that the context of where and what the work comes from should be a significant part of the work, right? Because if I'm going to use those fabrics as triggers for tie-dye fabrics, they come from somewhere, and that we should also focus on engaging not just the the idea that I want to make fantasy visualizations that are sort of inspired by that, but that we engage it in its full context in a sort of more rounded way, where you have like little animations of the historical, or you have documentary style video footage of people telling you what their process is and why they do this, or how they do it, or what it means to them to do it. So I just think that it's a work where I am bringing that aspect to the foreground. That context becomes in the foreground, whereas in every other work, I think it's still there. It's not. It's just not like the lead, but it comes out.
Speaking of full context, one thing we've spoken a lot about before about some of your other work, and we see a continuation here in Deep Blue Wells, is the importance of music.
Yes.
I would love to hear more about the music that you're using in these animations and in other aspects of Deep Blue Wells.
Well, I see that my friend Hawa is here. The last time I saw her, I was here at Wellesley, and the two of us sang a song, actually, somewhere in that direction. So these are like a lot of the people that I listed in the interview as some of my, the people that I looked to within the cultural context, because I didn't know any visual artists, so those were the people that I was looking at as how to be an artist. So pretty much the music comes from those group of people, those earlier musicians that I'm looking to, because there wasn't, like, in the context that I was locally growing up with, there wasn't like a contemporary visual art practice.
So let me go back to Deep Wells, but taking a different track. You're sort of focused on a sort of traditional technology, right? This is what I presume fascinates you. I mean, I know that you've always been interested in sort of technique and technology, and in the object in a sense. But your hits are themselves objects. They're different from the sort of traditional objects, and they are very highly technical objects as well. I was sort of told about the sort of choices you had to make, the alternatives, how you actually came to sort of decide on what was feasible within the context of this museum, etc. So how do you see your own making process and the technologies involved in it in juxtaposition to the subject that's inspired your own particular objects? In other words, is there any parallel between, this is a leading question in some sense, but is there any parallel between your own pits and the process of imagining and bringing in the complex technologies that inhabit them? Next to the technologies of the sort of historical tradition, which the more you know about, the more sophisticated one recognizes it is. I mean, I think this is partially probably what draws you there.
Absolutely.
So can you say something about how you see your making process in relation to the making process of an ancient technology?
I can say that I'm a rat in my own studio. I'm a rat in my own lab, because anyway, the whole interest, like the idea of using technology as a medium and as a metaphor for power dynamics, and calling this notion of questioning who has access, what it means to have access. I mean, I'm constantly in that state, right? Because I have limited resources on what I have access to. So I think maybe it's more obvious now, but it's always been there that I am weighing both sort of the traditional technologies and the contemporary technologies, bringing them together and sort of trying to navigate and mediate how I'm gonna put them together and how to negotiate between the two, I mean, I think it has to do with my upbringing and your upbringing. The fact that I think both you and I like have this thing where we, born in Nigeria, but we grew up in England part of the time, and sort of just the drastic shift from, being in an environment where there's constant electricity, and then jumping into an environment where it, it's in flux, and then kind of going back and forth. And I think you become acutely aware early of, what that does to the environment and how we mediate and negotiate availability of technology and access to technology. And I think really it probably comes there, but I don't know really. I'd probably take a very good shrink to figure that out.
I don't know if you, I don't know if artists read scholars or even critics who sort of write about their work, right? So I know that, I don't know if Nicole Fleetwood is actually in the audience or whether
She
she's
wasn't
here.
able to come
Okay, she
tonight,
wasn't able
yeah.
to come,
Yeah.
right. So, I mean, she sort of interprets your relationship to technology in one sense in relation exactly to what you've said, which is a sort of more interior, personalized relationship to it that you're sort of in some sense exploring through the work. But she also suggests a kind of message to the world beyond in relation to a certain view of both of Africa's connection to technology, but also of a certain idea that Western technology in some ways could sort of save the continent, right?
No, I'm not looking for a savior, and I'm not really trying to suggest that. I'm just saying that I'm not even, all I'm saying is that my level of early awareness of sort of the power dynamics connected with technology happened very early.
Okay.
It isn't something that that happened late in my life.
Sure.
It's something because of my engagement of multiple cultural contexts. I think I came to this trajectory and have been on that path quite early, before I even became an artist.
Right, but sorry to bring her back in, but she sees it as a kind of, your work as a kind of critique of the idea itself that, which was sort of once prominent in the sort of developmental sort of idea of progress, that she sort of sees your work as a certain kind of critique of the very idea that technology would save us all, not just Africans.
I see what you're saying. Sort of a critique of sort of a McLuhan approach to, this solves the problem.
Exactly.
And I'm
exactly. Which I think we're beginning more and more to sort of recognize that, especially in sort of our ecological moment, that actually technology, that it could be the opposite of what it promises, that in somehow, that the planet doesn't survive if we keep pushing to both the limits of, but also the idea that within technology itself is a possibility ultimately of salvation.
I mean, I think that's a part of it. I don't think there's a conflict in terms of. I don't think my work is about one thing, for example.
Of course yeah.
So it is about certain kinds of tensions that have to do with the technology. It is about a larger sort of global expression of technology and the impact it has. It is about how we're modified by the technology that we use, because I think it does have an impact. So I think it's about multiple things. It just depends, and different works also underscore different aspects of this conversation.
Yeah.
So it probably is, it's too bad we're having a conversation about Nicole. She's not here.
Yeah, she sent her regrets. But to build on your question about making, and actually your earlier question about Fatima's larger project as a research project, I think a lot of us would also be interested in hearing about the methods for deep blue wells. You took 2 trips to Kano. You did extensive literature research in addition to working with people. How did you approach this research?
Well, it really, honestly, the first aspect of it has to do with documentation, right? And I have more documentation than I've ended up with in the work. So we haven't even seen, the traditional weaving of the fabric. We haven't seen the factories that make the fabric or the farms, which I went to, that grow the cotton. I mean, it's quite vast and extensive, but which my goal was to go as broad as I can and then sort of pare it down to what it was going to be. Also, like, I mean, I guess because of travel, you kind of want a large scope, because it's not easy to just say, I'm going back.
Yeah.
So I think there's that. And then there is, of course, trying to figure out, like, what AR and how AR would interface with what I'm trying to do, and what it can augment and what it can bring. And I wasn't interested in, one of the things I wanted to make sure I didn't do is I was not interested in an AR piece where is like AR is sexy and you know the objects themselves are unimportant or insignificant. It's just that they trigger something, or that the marker is just a trigger. I wanted to make something cohesive that allows an experience, regardless of whether you ever pick up a phone and trigger something or not, that it could hold its own as an installation. So that was definitely important to me, you know. And then Jennifer knows more about this than anybody in here, but I also categorized and grouped things into different kinds of experiences that I'm trying to call up, whether it's documentation or whether it's a kind of relief from watching a kind of documentary style footage and having other kinds of footage, you know. And you had a lot of questions for me, which I never ever was able to answer any of them, but maybe now you'll be able to answer them for me. So I think it's multiple moving parts, and it's multiple mediums. So like, also like, I think maybe the best way to answer this is actually really easy. You guys remember the bunch of snake heads that were actual real snake heads, and then they didn't match because the body was a drawing. That's why they didn't match. So it's kind of calling up that sort of idea of medium also, you know. So there's multiple mediums. So the body is never ever going to match because it's not. It's a photograph, and this is a drawing. Yeah. It's a different technology. Yeah. So that might be really at the core of the way that I can think of how to answer that question about process.
Thank you.
Hi.
Amanda.
Amanda.
I was just about to open it up to questions, but yes, we
Hi, Chica. How are you?
So,
yes.
So interested in the time that you spent working with Indigo as an artist, working on the process. What did you learn? What did you learn by working with the dye pits and the dyers? What was your takeaway?
Well, the most important thing you need to know about me at the pits is I actually fell into one.
Wow.
So I have intimate knowledge of the pits beyond what you had imagined. Yes, when you have, apparently it's a very common thing, people show up with cameras, walk back and fall in. I learned the chemistry of the specificity of what the process is. So that was probably the most that I learned. Like, I didn't know, like, I've been going like on school trips since I was a little girl in grade school, but I didn't know the actual process. So I learned a lot about the process going there.
Some of the dyers?
Yes, I do. Yes, I got to know the people in person, and that was also great, you know. Some of them tried to come, actually. They just weren't able to get visas.
how?
Hey!
This is not only educational, it is absolutely exceptional. In my other life, I'm a lawyer. So I do work with extreme groups like Boko Haram and ISIS at some points. And this piece about House of Okoye and the Banza Bokoye, I think it's a more powerful piece that was communicated, really. The country of Nigeria is a little bit over 200 million people, and Hausa is spoken in over 16 countries in West Africa. And the history of Bayajida and Daura actually is the city of the current president of the country.
That's right.
I think the power of the woman, the soft power of the female, the power that we possess is as WCW, Women Centers for Women, and the college here, is so much that there is a fear of the unknown years before. And it's sort of continuing over time. And today we have groups such as Boko Haram or the ISIS. It's because of this absence of history. And I really believe that this year work should go beyond Wesley College. And I was watching a documentary about women that are now in the borders of Kuwait. And actually I came in from Hong Kong today just because I want to be here. And they are women of the ISIS wives, the wives that have been killed by, because of the challenges. And they said something that was really powerful that shook me. We have no husbands. Our children, your older ones, have been taken away from us. We are the next ISIS, and we are going to be even more dangerous. And for us to be able to have a global peace that we all aspire for ourselves and our children yet to come, your work is more than relevant in times like this.
Thank you.
Bringing history back into peace and bringing history back into our difficult situation of when history was changed to please some powerful group of men.
Thank you, Jawa.
No, you're joking.
No.
I can, well, say what
No.
There's something I want to say.
Like a
Yeah, I don't know.
remark.
Yeah, is it a remark? Wow, have we been here an hour? Okay. I guess I just wanted to ask you, since you say you fell into a pit, I mean, the people who were the people who sort of were teaching you, were they men or women?
Well, the way it works is women create and invent the designs and tie them,
Okay.
and men are the ones who dip them and oxygenate them.
All right. So my question.
So, and I had relationships with both.
Right. So my question, relating indirectly to sort of your comment, is that some scholars have suggested that the technology of dye pits was actually a technology that would once have been controlled by women. I'm sort of thinking about, I don't know if you know her, but Heidi Nast at DePaul University, who's written a book on the history of the Emir's Palace in Kano, where she sort of speaks about fields of dye pits, and she sort of tells the story of how men sort of came to be dominant and take over that technology. So I guess I was just wondering whether you're aware of that in some sense your work is historically could be a way, in terms of your own actual practice, a way of reclaiming a technology that actually was once a technology that apparently women were once in control of. Because I think that that's one way in which it might be seen as subversive in the sense that in northern Nigeria, especially given some of the Boko Haram type of thinking, that women are increasingly being repositioned in society in a way that is just historically completely untrue and crazy. Yeah. But
I don't have an answer.
You don't have an answer to that yet.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yes, I think I'll tell you more about my falling in the pit in the exhibition.
Okay.
Right?
So please, when you are using the AR, be aware of what's behind you.
Don't fall into the pit.
Yeah, so this is an issue in the exhibition as well. Please join me in thanking both Ikem and Fatima
Thank
for
you.
doing that.
Thank you, Ikem.